I was born in Waratah, but I was raised in Adamstown on the highway opposite the Catholic school and church. And my father, they were army homes for returned servicemen, and my father went to the war. And he started at the store when he was 14. And when he came back from the war, they just took him back. And he was there until he retired when he was in his 60s. Yeah.
And what school did he go to?
I went to Adamstown Public School, and then I went to Newcastle Girls High.
And what did you do after high school?
And after high school, I had a job in an insurance office. And I was married from there. I worked there 5 years, and I was married from there. In those days, once you got married, you were out. So I lost my job. And then my husband died, and I worked at Wallsend High School in the office for 20 years.
Now, what's your association with the store?
I have a lot of association with the store. My mother worked on the haberdashery counter. I had an aunt that worked on the cake counter, and my father worked on the grocery counter, and then he went out to Clyde Street as the paymaster.
And what was your mum's name?
My mother's name was Emily Bull. Yes.
So she worked in haberdashery. Do you know how many years she worked there for?
I think she worked there about 10 years because my father married twice, and so he wasn't early married, and always on the haberdashery counter. Yes.
Do you have recollections of seeing, was that before you were born?
No, I don't. There were no photos.
No photos.
Those from that time. And my mother's sister worked up in the hat department, and she worked up there. We always got our Sunday school hats and our winter hats from Aunty Essie up on the millinery, up on the hat department. And then she got headhunted by Ashley's Buckingham when they opened up a big store at the Civic, and she went there as head of 2 or 3 departments up there. So it was a department store.
Yes.
Yes. Just down a little way from Auckland Street, on Hunter Street. And it was, we never went there. We only ever went to the store.
Loyal.
Oh, yes, to the nth degree, yes.
So do you know much about like your mum's parents? Were they members of the store, or do you know how early your mum became a member of the store?
My grandparents weren't, my grandmother had a store account, but Mum went to work there from school. You know, she applied, and that's how really we started to get involved with the store. But my grandmother, not so much. No. Mm.
And do you remember the tokens? Like apparently everyone had a member's number, a membership number.
Yes, my number was W480, and mine was D2133.
So the store sold a lot of things, everything. Can you recall what else they sold?
They sold, Aunty Essie was on the millinery, and Mum was down on the haberdashery, and my father was round on the grocery department. And we had a friend of my father's was on they sold beautiful Napoleon cake.
And did they sell it anywhere else in Newcastle, Napoleon?
No, only at the store. I've never seen it before or since. Well, I didn't know it before, but I've never ever seen it since anywhere. It's flaky pastry on the bottom, and it had like custard in the middle and flaky pastry on the top, and then pick icing.
Oh, wow.
And Mum of a Wednesday used to always bring home a piece of Napoleon. It was such a big part of my life. I can't, it was my childhood really. And, with Dad there, and Mum had worked there, and that's how he met my mother. And he had been married before. He's married an English lady, and she died, and then he met Mum and married Mum. So the store was just, I can't quite describe it, but it was sort of part and parcel of your life. And you knew people, you knew everybody on the counter, you knew them on the haberdashery counter, or Miss Muston, you knew, up in the Allura Cafe, and Dad on the grocery counter, and all the men on the grocery counter that knew who you were, and Dad with his clean, always tie and shirt and his sleeves down, and an apron, a white apron that my mother had to starch. He'd only wear one a day, they all had to be washed and starched and ironed, and as we got bigger we had to do it for the two. And, it was a fastidious man, but they all were, and everybody knew you.
And so you mentioned the horses before, your earliest memory of the store?
Yes.
So describe.
It's getting off the tram, and you'd get off the tram that side, and there'd be the big Shire horses coming out of the brewery. And we used to, we'd go and wait at out the front, for another aunt of mine, and the brewery was straight opposite. And you'd stand and it used to fascinate you because the big drays with the kegs had come out with these huge, Dad said they were Shire horses, I don't know what he meant by that, and they were huge horses with great big hooves and hair, and they'd come out and come right across the road. Everything had to stop because the horses were coming out, and they'd come across the road, and you'd look at them and you'd think, oh, the most beautiful things I'd ever seen with these horses.
So was that Newcastle West?
Yes. Yeah.
So there was obviously a stable somewhere nearby?
Well, it was the brewery opposite. I don't know where the stables were, but the brewery was right opposite. Mm.
So they're like the Clydesdale horses?
Yes, Clydesdales.
Yeah.
Yes. But as gentle could be. I mean, if you were on that side of the road, you could pat them and they wouldn't even move. They'd be just sitting there. No, that's a nice memory.
And I can imagine children, they'd be so taken by horses.
Yes.
And they'd be like giants to them.
Well, we never saw horses. We were it's the kids living in Adamstown, and most people would be in Newcastle. Well, where would you see a horse? So that it was quite just standing there looking at the horses. Yeah.
So what about the bread van, the horse and cart bread delivery?
Well, I had my uncle, my auntie, my father's son, brother-in-law. Do you know, but I can't for the life of me think of his last name, Bill, and he was killed off a straw baker's cart. Horse bolted for some reason, and Uncle Bill Brighton. And he fell off and was killed, left my Auntie Nell with 8 children. In those days there was no compensation or anything like that, Yeah. So that was my father's sister, and just bolted for some reason, and that was that. Yeah, I don't know, can't remember what year that was, but that was another bit of a thing from the store. Yeah, so...
And just thinking, like when the trams used to run from suburbs into the city.
Yes.
It would have been so easy to get to the store.
It was, and we lived on the highway at Adamstown, and Johnny had to walk four houses down and up the stairs, and that was the tram terminus. Yeah, so we were big store people, big tram people.
Did the tram go directly out the front of the store?
Yes. Yes, it stopped directly at the front of the store and then went up into right up the top of Newcastle. Yes, yeah. It used to go from Adamstown right into through Broadmeadow and then just straight up into. I'm not very good at streets because I never drove a car, and straight up to the store and then up to the top of the town. Mm.
What was your father's name?
Charles Wiggins. And he was there and he was over at Clyde Street when that was more of where they used to go have the horses and the carts, Yeah. And so we knew quite a few people at the store, and another lady that we knew worked on the glove counter, and then there was the haberdashery counter and the glove counter, And there was a wicker chair, and when we were little girls, you had to climb up on them. They were so high, so that you could look over the glass counter. Yeah, it was a good place to store.
And so you mentioned your dad was on the groceries. Was that at Newcastle West at the store?
Yes. And then when they'd opened, they started at not as a store properly, but he went out to Clyde Street, and then he became the paymaster. And he used to go with the pays out to Wallsend and out to Belmont, and he had to go to the bank and sort out the pays to take around.
And what was
how he finished up?
Worked his way up at the store?
Yes. And Mr. Gibb, who was the word's gone.
The general manager?
Yes, and Dad got on well with Mr. Gibb.
A lot of other people have talked fondly of Mr. Gibbs as well.
Yes, he was a nice man.
And saying he was a really good, firm but fair manager.
Yes.
Can you recall your dad sort of saying similar things? Or?
Well, Dad and he got on really well. Well, they must have done, because when I got married, I married a Dutchman we had no money, and we went to live out at Redhead in a garage. And Dad asked Mr. Gibb, would he recommend me to the Newcastle Permanent Building Society for a loan, so we could get a loan to build a house. And Mr. Gibb did. And he wasn't very popular, because the man that managed the building society, when I went, I had to go and get forms and things. He was so horrible that I cried all the way home to Redhead in the bus, because about people being favouritism and, people getting things when they really weren't entitled to it. And I've never forgotten that, and I never forgave him either. And yes, so it was nice. And yes, and it was, and Dad really was really fond of the store, and people liked my father. He was a nice man, and whatever he did well.
Do you know how long he worked there for?
Well, I was trying to think. He went there at 14, and when the First World War came, he went to war, and we came home, and he had been badly wounded, and so he didn't work. He was had to live up in the country for a while, and he came back, and the store took him straight back. And then he finished up when he was, I think he was about 65, 66 when finally he finished up. But by then he used to go, he was the paymaster, so that he wasn't on his feet all the time, and he used to take the pays out to Wallsend and out to Belmont, and then do all the pays in town.
Yeah. That's a long career.
Yes, he did have a long career.
Yes. And you said when he came back from war, did he have any physical injuries?
Yes, he'd been shot through both his knees, so they were never any good after.
And so the store accommodated his injuries,
no.
And I guess no.
No, you went to work and you came home and you didn't say anything, and then he'd crawl. We had 15 steps at the back, and he'd crawl up the steps. He couldn't walk up the steps. And many a time, and my mother would sit him out, and he'd sit with his legs out, and Mum would rub his legs with olive oil till finally some of the pain went. No, the store, they were a good firm to work for. He went to the war and he came back, and the store, there was never any talk about him not coming back to go to the store. And it wasn't, but those days, if it didn't work, and that was that.
And it probably was a nice routine for him, particularly if he was well liked, and he obviously was someone that worked well with people and working the groceries, and he would have got to know a lot of people.
Yes, and he was a likeable man. He was, and he knew everybody, and of course those days everybody was in the store. Yeah. My mother's family were, and my father's family were, and all my aunts. And one of my aunt, his dad's sister's husband, worked on the bread carts and was killed on the bread cart. On the bread cart. So all sorts of things happened. It wasn't just people went to work and came home. But Uncle Bill, the horse, got frightened and ran, and Uncle Bill fell off, and was run over. And so a lot of things happened at the store.
Yeah. And the store, it didn't just sell its retail, but it had its health funds. It had apparently like superannuation, but a lot of other sort of supports and funds and things. Yeah.
It was a family. It was more of a great big, I don't know. And if you were somebody that went to the store, not just because Dad worked there and because Mum had worked there, my Auntie Essie was up in the hats and things, that wasn't it. Everybody knew you. And if I never saw, you know, it was just everybody knew who you were. It was very, I don't know. You know, you go into stores now, you don't feel, and people don't want to know you either anymore, do they?
No.
So, no, the store was a good shop.
Yeah, there's not that personal sort of care, is there? There's not that genuine sort of wanting to help like there used to be.
And especially as you get older, I mean, I wasn't old then, but, you know, you notice that unless you really know the people in the shops, they sort of sometimes tend to think, oh, she's an old lady, she doesn't know A from a bull's foot, and that's not right.
Not right, no. And so your dad, he was living at Adamstown at the time when he worked in Newcastle?
He lived at Hamilton with his mum and dad. He lived in Demarrick Street.
Yeah.
He used to ride his push bike from there. And then he went to the First World War, married an English, well, he didn't marry her there, she followed him out. And he married her and she died in childbirth. And he went home to his mother and rented the house out because he still had to pay the rent on it. Yeah. And then when he married Mum, Mum and he went out and he lived in the house in Adamstown. Yes.
And would he ride his bike still to work from Adamstown?
Summer, winter, rain or hail or 110 degrees, Dad rode his bike to work and rode his bike back home again.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so can you recall what he would say about the Hamilton North depot? Did he talk much about the bakery or any of his work?
No.
There, no.
No, he didn't. And really, I didn't know anything about the bakery. Only that I knew, you know, that everything you got was good from there, and only that Uncle Bill was on the baker's card.
Yeah.
No, I only knew that. And my Auntie Essie was up in the millinery. She was there for years. And Mum was on the haberdashery counter.
Yes, yeah.
And, so he sort of just knew.
Sort of just, bits of stories from people. Yeah,
bits of the store and other bits because you never went into them.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing that you thought about.
No. So when you married and had your family, did you shop at the store?
Well, by then I lived at Redhead, but I still used to go into the store. Yes, because that was, you know, it just seemed to be the normal thing to do, really. Yes.
What about Divvy Day? Do you recall the divvy?
Yes, I've got my divvy book.
So what was the divvy?
Well, it was a shilling in the pound. And then when we went up into decimals, it was 10 cents in the dollar. And I went up, and now see, I haven't got my book. And you could borrow out of it. If you had, you know, that's how I got a table and chairs for when we lived in, because we were only in a garage. And there was quite a number of things that I borrowed out of my divvy book. And then when I was, and a couple of times I did overspend, and they had a go at not a go at Dad, but they said to Dad, "You'd better talk to Ruth. She's starting to think this is a bank account." So then we sort of sorted all that out. I never did that again.
No.
But yeah.
And I guess because the cooperative was owned by the members, like the community, so it was like a dividend that went to the shareholder, like the member.
And it was. It altered a few times because when I looked, I'd forgotten, but it was dependent on how things were going. But I know it was 10 cents in the dollar, which wasn't bad because you bought everything there. And even at Redhead, they came from Belmont, And Charlie used to come on the fruit and vegetable what's the word? Lorry, you know.
Yeah.
And the bread's still delivered, so that and it was all one thing sort of for a while, and I don't know, I moved from Redhead then, and so I don't know what happened after that.
So they did deliver to Redhead?
From Belmont, though.
From Belmont, yeah.
Mm.
So that can you recall where there were other stores?
There was one out at Wall's End, but no, I had never been there. No. And then the one at Hamilton, but other than that, I don't know.
So there was one at Belmont. So that's
yes.
Interesting that they delivered from Belmont.
Yes. Mm.
Can you recall anything else you purchased on the divvy?
I had my dashboard.
People have often talked about getting like their children's uniforms, or they sort of spend it on things that were needed.
You bought because my aunty Essie was on the hat department, millinery department, and we always bought our hats, the girls' hats there, and you always had a hat, to go to church with. Yeah. So that and the girls had a winter hat and a summer hat, Yes. And every year you got a new hat to go to church in. And so, the hat department did it very well for me.
Yeah.
And the girls would climb up on because the chairs at the counter were about this high, and they'd clamber up on the top of the top. Well, I did too as a little girl, because they always had the same sort of chairs with cane bottoms, Yes. Yeah.
Now, do you recall going to Alara Hall, which was the reception centre?
One of my sisters had a 21st birthday party up there. Yes.
And was it a spacious room?
No, I wouldn't say it was a spacious room. And if you had like a number of guests, which, you mainly do, no, there wasn't much room. And there I can't quite remember because we were Methodist and you didn't dance. And but I think there was a small dance floor too. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wouldn't say it was a huge area at all.
No.
Mm.
Now, other people have talked really fondly of the window displays.
Yes, a beautiful window displays.
What do you recall from the windows?
The Christmas window displays, yes. And Santa Claus when we were bits of kids, and snow and the Christmas tree and, yeah, lovely.
So you remember going there as a child, or did you take your children there? Can you recall going there as a child yourself?
Yes, I can. And I can remember distinctly, because Auntie Essie was on the haberdashery, and that's where Mum was too when she worked there. And remember quite vividly trying to get up on the chair by myself because they came up high for a little girl. Yeah. And my sisters were the same. We all used to try to clamber up onto the chair. Yes.
So what decade would have that been that you were a child visiting?
Well, I'm 85, so, from when I can remember about 6 years old, I suppose.
Yeah. So in the 1940s?
Yes. And Mum we used to go in every Wednesday when we were kids because we'd meet my grandmother and then we'd walk up the town right up to the top and get the bus. Or it was a tram then to go back home again. Yes. So it was a weekly excursion to the store.
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, so many people have just talked so fondly, and we've interviewed Terry Stanmore, who was the window display manager.
Oh, was he?
So he's got all his photos.
Oh, how
but I'm thinking they're from the 1960s, 70s.
Yes.
Porton.
They were beautiful. Yes,
yeah.
Always. Yeah.
So you were saying the tram ran out the front?
Yes, straight out the front. You've got off on this side and got on back over on the other side. Yeah. Yes.
Have you been into Newcastle West lately?
Not for a long time. I don't. If we go anywhere, we generally stick around here. Yes.
So there's certainly a lot of change in Newcastle. Like talking about the tram, where now there's the light rail.
Yes.
the store has been demolished.
Yes.
So it's no longer there. People's memories are there. You know,
Well, that's
people.
all you've got, isn't it? Just memories. And I know the in the bottom underneath the store that when we had a lot of rain, it used to flood in under there from Frosby Creek. There's no such thing as Frosby Creek anymore. Yeah. And it used to flood in the hardware department in underneath. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
And so, you know, a lot of things sort of happened at the store. Yes, and I don't know, there were it's not there anymore. I don't know how they got rid of Throsby Creek. Not very, but it used to flood, flooding up in underneath the, yeah. Mm.
You also mentioned to me about the honour board.
Yes.
The other day, yeah. Tell me about that.
Well, it's up at and it's up in the museum, and it's it was the men that went to the war from the store from the First World War. In the First World War, the men that went to the war were on this honour board. I don't know where it was at the store. I've got no idea. I don't know however it got up to where it ended up in the museum, but it came from the store. So I would think it would have been downstairs, and as you go in the front door, it must have been there somewhere at one stage. But they were all there. I think there were 7 or 8 of them, and went to the war from the store. And they just took them back when they came back from the war. And my father was shot through both legs, so he couldn't go back to work for a long time. But they still got taken back, and yes, and he loved the store.
It's like a family.
Yes, it was just like a great big family. Everybody knew everybody else. And, yes.
So his name was Charlie Wiggins.
Yes, Chiller. And they all knew us too, because, you know, you went every Wednesday. And once you went to school, every school holiday, same thing. You know, you'd all go to the store, and you'd have your morning tea at the store, and then walk from the store right up to the bus terminus at Pacific Park.
Yeah.
Yes, big day.
Now, is there anything else you want to say, or anything about the legacy of the store?
Well, I think people remember, because even now, in fact, only about 2 years ago, I was up at New Lambton, and a lady that was older than me, for heaven's sake, came up and said, "You're Charlie Wiggins' daughter." And I nearly fell over, and I said, "Yes, I am." And I said, "How do you know?" And she said, "Oh, I remember you coming into the store." So think about that. And so, you know, everybody went to the store. If you weren't in the store, well, I don't know, everybody seemed to be at the store. And that was that. And although you'd go up to Wynns and John's, there was John's and Scott's, actually, Scott's, it wasn't the same. And it never felt the same either, for some reason. Perhaps because Dad knew everybody, and Mum had worked there, and my Auntie Essie worked there, and I had a sister work there for a while too, and she worked down in the hardware department, and when they had rain, they used to have to work with nothing on, with their stockings and shoes off, because it used to flood.
God.
But that's a long time ago.
Yeah, I think you've described that so well, because, you know, it wasn't until like Katara, Garden City, or Westfield, as it's called today, Charlestown Square opened, there was really no other competition except for the ones that you mentioned, like Scott's. So everyone sort of was in the one place, and they got to know each other.
Yes, and when the store had opened up at Charlestown there for a while, and I was living in Redhead, and I only went in there a couple of times because it didn't feel the same.
No.
And I said to my husband, "I don't like being here," and I never bothered myself, you know.
God. it was so completely different, wasn't it? It was
Yes.
modern and like, yeah, you compare it to the
Yes.
Newcastle West one and
And
complete.
people didn't know me. Or in Hunter West, you know, everybody knew you. Oh, Charlie Wiggins' daughter. And that was that. Because he worked there for a long time. And he was a man that made friends easily. And, yes, it always felt funny, Charlestown.
Been a really lovely interview, and it's just nice from the perspective of a daughter of someone that worked there. So, yeah, thank you very much.
That's all right, not a problem.